Aire, rompe la madera, no quiere perder tu un poquito incorporado. Claro, usted sabe que es la única palabra que te doy a decirle que también no se me prende. Disculpa, obligado el traje, no me
Bum tarde, good evening, good afternoon, good evening. Hope everyone is well. Hope you are reaching your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual health as always. And we are glad that you are here for our Ancestors' Voices, our 145th episode of our Ancestors' Voices, a program sponsored each Sunday, same time, same place, by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. We're so glad to be with you today for this week's topic, which is the Cooptation of African History Month, the Cooptation of African History Month. So we're going to be talking about the beauty of African history. All people's history is a wonderful thing, but how when a people's history is tied to their oppression and it's tied to their struggle to be free, as is the history of African people, how the capitalist system works overtime to co-opt that history, to take away the militancy in that history. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So glad that you're here to join us for this topic. And we start, as we always do, by paying respect to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. We stand, sit, lie, shoulder to shoulder with them in their struggle for justice and their struggle for the rightful return of these lands to them as they should. And I know a lot of times, you know, we say that and people are like, oh yeah, great. But in your mind, you really don't believe that that's ever going to happen. And so we're just here to tell you, you just keep on believing that. And one day you're going to be faced with the reality that it has happened. Or if you're not, some of your family or people you know are going to be faced with that reality. And then, you know, just hopefully the indigenous people will demonstrate just a portion of compassion with folks that has, you know, never been provided to them. So we stand with them in their struggle for justice 100%. And we, of course, stand with our African ancestors, who are the only reason why we are here. We owe everything to them. We live our lives with the effort to bring integrity to the legacy that they have left us. They have struggled from the beginning of our existence in Africa all the way to our miserable existence in these colonized empires. So we continue to fight back in their honor and their memory, and nothing will sway us from continuing to live our lives that way. So we are so glad that you're here for today, this next hour, to talk with us about, or to participate with us on this subject of the co-optation of African history. And we start, as we always do, just with brief introductions. Our Ancestors' Voices, as I mentioned, this is our 145th episode, and it's a weekly program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the AAPRP. And the AAPRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass, pan-African political party that is based in Africa. We are not based in New York or LA or San Francisco or Chicago or any place like that. We're based in the national homeland of all people of African descent, the African continent. And our objective is Pan-Africanism, which we define correctly as one unified socialist Africa, one unified socialist Africa. And our work to achieve Pan-Africanism, we do have a strategy to do so, is outlined in great detail in Kwame Nkrumah's 1968 book, The Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, which the cover is displayed on the middle right of the screen, if you're looking at a screen. And this book outlines how the strategy to achieve Pan-Africanism is rooted in the work to unify all revolutionary Pan-African formations on the ground in Africa. And our work in the APRP is focused on that, to build the All-African Committee for Political Coordination, or AACPC, which in its finished form will be the actual manifestation of the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. So just having returned from Guinea-Bissau a couple of weeks ago, I had the honor and privilege to participate in some of that work. I've done it in other areas all throughout the African continent, and our party continues to do that work. And our Ancestors' Voices is hosted each week by myself, Ajamu, and Shakura, my biological and ideological daughter, both of us active organizers within the All African People's Revolutionary Party. So to get us started on our topic for today, the co-optation of African History Month, I humbly turn it over to Shakura.
Thank you. Thank you so much, kind sir. Greetings, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. So we are so excited. I think this is probably one of my top 3 favorite seminar topics that we give. I think it's extremely important to really unpack why we would even think to do a seminar about this topic, first of all. And in order to do that, one would have to really think about the conditions and the society that we find ourselves living in. And so, by no means, majority of everything that we have access to in this United Snakes of America has either been taken by force, by stolen force, or by, theft of land, exploitation of people, whether that's through unconsented violation of sexual exploitation. It could be mental exploitation, ideologically exploitation for sure, as well as colonization. And so I think that it's really important to think about how all of those ingredients, if you're thinking metaphorically and we're stirring them in a pot, how all of those are going to contribute to a very atrocious meal, for lack of a better term. And the people who are being served this meal are centering themselves as America being the center and the most important part of the meal. And so, we have to really unpack, why is it that we should start to think more Pan-Africanly instead of just thinking from this American-centered standard? And a lot of that is because it's okay for people to be ignorant. Like, that's very attractive in this country, for you to not know what you're talking about, but to boast and go on like you do know what you're talking about. It's not attractive if you actually want to do research and you want to study and you want to understand things. That's why we have terms, where we degrade people when they indicate things like that, and call them names and make fun of them, because, why would a good person who has moral values want to spend time reading books, right? That's not cool to do that, right? But at the end of the day, if we don't know where we came from, that means we don't understand how much exploitation actually occurred to our people, then we're not going to be able to understand why Pan-Africanism is precisely the key. Because if we don't understand what happened to us before some of us were literally dropped off on the United Snake soil, then we're not going to understand how we fought to prevent a lot of us from getting on the slave ships in the first place. We're not going to understand the contradictions that came with that. We're not going to understand how we were navigating to the best of our abilities. And in some spaces, we had a lot of different European influences that came in and started dictating how we would operate. And to this day, some of those same influences, polygamy, patriarchy, homophobia, they exist very strongly throughout the African continent. And so some of those things have been strongly rooted because of colonialism and then enforced by neocolonialism. And so, but again, if you don't even understand who you are, then you're not going to understand why it's important to study Africa. So even if you yourself were born in Miami, even if you yourself were born in Haiti, even if you yourself were born in Victoria or some other part of Canada, or even in Germany, but you identify as an African, you must go back to the roots, which means understanding what happened on the continent first. You have to. It would be like getting in a car, but not choosing to put on a seatbelt or choosing to put your hands on the steering wheel. I mean, that's foundation. And you're not going to be able to operate the vehicle unless you navigate the steering wheel. It would be the same thing with not understanding your roots. And so if we're studying what has gone on and what has transpired through the history and the herstory and the theirstory of Africa, then that means we're considering what it means to be Pan-Africanist. Because as we have learned from so many other people, whether it was Marcus Garvey, whether it was Kwame Nkrumah, whether it was Sekou Touré, whether it was Amilcar Cabral, whoever it was, they have said to us time and time again, if we are reading the materials that they have published, that they have seen common denominators across the world, that Africans everywhere are under attack, and we are suffering from all of the same ideological and physical issues that are challenging us. Malcolm X talked about how we are suffering from poverty and we are not being able to get access to fresh fruits and vegetables. Marcus Garvey backed him up and said the same thing. And he said, you know, I'm going to travel from Jamaica. I'm going to go to the United States. I'm going to travel to some other parts of the world. I want to see our Africans everywhere living these similar lives. And what he discovered was it was in fact the case. That's one of the reasons why he decided to create this conquest, so that we could hope to get our people home one day. And unfortunately, that never happened, but that was the motivation behind that. The same thing with Kwame Nkrumah. You know, he grew up on African soil and decided to come to Europe to do work. And he was studying and writing there and doing different things like that. And then he came to the United States and even went to school and learned more and more about how Africans in America are just as suffering as the Africans on the West African continent, or the Africans in Canada, or Africans in different parts of Europe. He traveled everywhere and saw the same denominators everywhere. So the point I'm making to you all is that it is more than dangerous at this point for us to choose not to engage in Pan-Africanism. And the best way that we can do that is by understanding that anything that is based out of America is going to center America only. And so the best way to refute that is to accept and adopt Pan-Africanism as your lifestyle of choice, and to consider engaging and learning about other Africans, not just Africans born in America, but Africans born everywhere who have contributed to you and I sitting here tonight, listening to this seminar and discussing on this seminar. Without their sacrifices, we may not be alive right now. And it would be foolish to not accept that, because you can't tell me that just Africans in America contributed to the advances that we have. That's impossible, because all 53 countries were under attack of colonialism. So if nobody decided to fight against colonialism, all of us would be much worse off than we already are. So you can't tell me that things that happened outside of America didn't contribute to African history. Next slide. I appreciate you. Thank you. All right. And so I'm going to try to do this as quickly as I can and give it back to my dad. But I just also want to highlight that, you know, it's really important from a secondary standpoint. First, we have to acknowledge that Pan-Africanism is the key. And in doing that, we're connecting the dots and we're advancing past this Western imperialist, you know, elitist approach. But we're actually looking at how Africans everywhere have contributed to the conditions that our people are in today. I mean, I try as much as I can to rattle feathers, and I always give the examples of our comrades who were literally fighting off colonizers. And so we think about our comrade Theodore Gomes, for example, right? Like just a huge fan of Theodore Gomes. And so we've talked in great detail about this comrade and how, you know, for 73 years, they have been on the front line, fighting for Africa, fighting for Guinea-Bissau, fighting for other countries alike, trying their best to help refute the colonizers, resisting the Portuguese, pushing them out, letting them know they were not welcome and then they could not come in there. In addition to doing that, this comrade was known for doing work in the community, helping from a community and economic standpoint, as well as a physical and military strategy standpoint. This comrade is still organizing to this day, and in their early 70s. And if I'm not mistaken, I want to say, Daddy, you spoke last week about how they hold a very high position for the PAIGC. So, you know, if we just continue to think about that a little bit more, we have to give honor and glory to the African Party for the Independence of Guinea, because that same organization is our sibling organization. And without them, we wouldn't be who we are as the All African People's Revolutionary Party, and vice versa. We lean on each other because our battles are the same and our end game is the same. We both want Africa to be free of colonizers and neo-colonizers, and we both want Africa to survive off of a socialist system so that we can eventually advance to communism. And so I think that in thinking about that, the other piece about why it's so important to acknowledge Africans who were born outside of the US is because without the specific contributions of Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Touré, Amilcar Cabral, and other comrades who contributed, this seminar would not even be happening right now. All three of those individuals were not born on American soil, but yet all three of those individuals understood the potentiality of starting an organization of this magnitude, and they understood that that specific organization, even though it's centered on Africa and centered on helping African people, they understood that that didn't mean that we should limit it just to the continent of Africa. That's precisely why they asked Kwame Ture to come to the US, so that he could start a work study chapter in the US. And before you knew it, it was in DC, and then it grew to California, and then we had chapters in the Midwest. There's not a lot of us in Tennessee, but we have work study circles in Tennessee. I mean, we are growing, you all. This is why we have chapters in Canada. We have chapters in Europe. We have chapters in different parts of California as well as the continent of Africa. And so I think it is extremely important that we need to acknowledge that the founders of the All African People Revolutionary Party, Amilcar Cabral, Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Touré, without them, we literally would not be doing this seminar right now. And that's precisely why we need to acknowledge how the work of Africans everywhere, globally, how the work of Africans has contributed to our advancement as people who are trying to free Mother Africa, trying our best to free it of any colonizer who is still trying to hold on to imperialist European values that are not benefiting humanity, that are not benefiting Africans, that are continuing to keep us shackled, whether it is physically or ideologically. We need to push all of that out. There's no reason why we should not be controlling all of the resources that Africa is known for producing. And the fact that we have the potentiality to do it means we just need to organize and get those folks up out of there, because they will leave if we force them to. But we're going to have to come together in order to do that. It's not going to start with one person, and it's not going to start with three people. It's going to be as many folks as possible, so that we can understand whether you're organizing on the ground in Africa, whether you choose to not go to Africa, but you still contribute to the fight. Maybe you attend African Liberation Day and you donate because you can't necessarily go home right now, but you understand that neo-colonizers don't need to be there. However you're contributing, it's going to take all of us. And this is precisely why, if you are in an organization that's working for justice, then you will see the value in studying how Africans everywhere have contributed. You will see the value in that. You'll be able to increase your political education, and you'll start to do more research. I personally can't wait to start reading the next book on our work study list, but I am going to try my hardest to read in tandem that book along with, I think you said this was Theodore Gomes' book, Daddy, Fighting Two Colonialisms. So this idea of being able to increase our political education is more important than we think, because without being able to know what has happened, we're not going to be able to take the tools from our ancestors, as well as those who are still living, so that we can still figure out ways to fight. I mean, I just told you that Theodore Gomes was literally on the fighting lines, pushing the Portuguese out. I mean, what can we not learn from her? Everything, okay? Like, we have so much to learn from her. So I think that it would behoove us to be able to pick up as many books as possible by these folks who have done the work, literally, and they have lived to tell about it. They were blessed and smart enough to sit down and document what they were doing as it was happening, so that we could be fortunate enough to use the internet, find the free PDFs now, and learn from them. I mean, how amazing is that? It'd be different if we were in the dark and we had no access to flashlights at all. That would be very different. But we have everything we need. All we need is to just do the research and literally pick up the books that they work so hard to publish for us. So in closing, join an organization that's working for justice. Challenge people when they use the term quote unquote Black history, challenge it and say, well, you understand that, you know, anything based in America is based on just centering American principles. So that means we're only focusing on Africans in the United States. And then I encourage you to challenge that more and say, how dangerous is that? So are only Africans in the US, are those the only ones who have made a difference? I beg to differ strongly. And then give some examples based on the seminars that you've listened to and the research that you've done. Part of the problem is that not enough people are speaking out against it. And again, how do How do cultures change? How do phenomenons start? How do things evolve? They change and they evolve and they start when more and more people organize together and say enough is enough. So just like we need to resist patriarchy and we need to resist white supremacy and we speak out against those things, we record those things and we complain and we tell people we're not going to tolerate it. We need to complain and tell people we're not going to tolerate it when they use terms that exclude Africans everywhere, because it's really celebrating African legacies, because history is exclusive to non-male people, but that's another story for another day. In my opinion, you should take that word out too, but neither here nor there. I'm passing the baton back to my dad. Celebrate African history and learn about Africans everywhere. We always say that you should challenge yourself and see how many non-male Africans can you name that were born outside of the US. See how many African males you can name that were born outside of the US. How many African non-binary people can you name that were born outside of the US? Because our job is to resist the centralization of the US, because the US does not deserve to be centered by any means. Ashe.
Ashe. Thank you. Medasi, Obrigada. And I just want to clarify, so the book you're referencing is Fighting Two Colonialisms by Stephanie Erdang, Urdang, Fighting Two Colonialisms by Stephanie Erdang. It's a book that chronicles the struggle of the African Party for the Independence of Guinea-Bissau, the PAIGC, and its anti-colonial struggle against the Portuguese, and the role of women in that struggle, women from the General Union of Guinea-Bissau Women, or UDEMU, of which Comrade Sister Teodora Gomez is prominently featured in that book. And just to add one more note to that, when I was there a couple of weeks ago in Guinea-Bissau and had a chance to meet and spend time with our immortal Sister Teodora Gomez, she made the remark that when I told her, Shakura, how much you and I admired her and how you grew up, and I tried to tell you as much as I could about women like her, her response was complete humility, that you would even know who she was, and clear across the world that there are African women here in this backward empire who would even know who she is and would be interested in her life. So, that's the kind of humility that, at least for me, is highly inspirational, and it speaks to why understanding history is so very important. So we want to just go further and talk about, just what is African History Month? February every year is commemorated in this backward dungeon empire as African History Month. So what does that mean? So first we start with just the basic history, right? Carter G. Woodson, the activist scholar, created Negro History Week in 1926. And if you study Carter G. Woodson, and if you have not, you should. He wrote a number of very notable items speaking to our condition, particularly his book, The Miseducation of the Negro. And he talks in that book, he really talks about the psychology of oppression. And he, it's very important because he really touched on that subject before a lot of the people who today are known for that subject, like Frantz Fanon, the great Pan-African psychiatrist who wrote Wretched of the Earth, Black Skin, White Masks, other books that deal with that topic. Steve Biko, I Write What I Like, many other people who address that concept. Well, he wrote about it 100 years ago, Carter G. Woodson, and he talked about, how if you destroy people's culture and give them such a negative view of who they are, that you won't even have to tell them to go out the back door. They'll look for that back door themselves. And I think that 100 years after he wrote that, that's still a very accurate depiction of where we are psychologically as a people. So he invented this concept then. And if you fast forward to the emerging Black Power movement in the 1960s, the expansion of the observation of our history was taking over the entire month of February and calling it Black History Month. And I think, like Shakur said, we have to talk about why we need to always include Africa in everything that we do. And we'll talk about that for the remaining time we have left in terms of analyzing what our enemies do with our history to try to derail us. But the point of what happened in the 60s is, I think it was a positive effort to recognize that we had the right and responsibility to assert ourselves and to determine who we are for ourselves and not rely on other people, particularly our enemies, to provide that narrative to us. And that's an important point that I think has been lost a great deal over the last 50 plus years. And so now today, you know, we look at it, and of course, there's a lot of talk now about the need for us to commemorate our history year round, right? We don't just have a month, the shortest month. And for those of us who are involved in our liberation struggle, of course, we commemorate our history 24/7, 365 days a year. We don't wait for the capitalist system to tell us we can do it in February. I mean, that's insane. We don't wait for the capitalist system to tell us to commemorate women and marginalized gender people in March. That's insanity. We do that 365 days a year, 24/7. So that's the point of where we want to start with our analysis today, in looking at, if you're able to see the screen, and if you can't, I'll describe it to you. So what we're displaying here is a picture of a Barclays Bank branch. And then from there, we connect the Barclays Bank branch to a number of petty bourgeoisie African celebrities: Michael Jordan, Oprah Winfrey, Serena Williams. Put whoever you want in there, Kanye West, Barack Obama, it doesn't matter, put any of them in there. And then that's connected to the US flag. And the point of this graphic, you all, is to make the point that the wealth of this society, this capitalist society, of course, evolves out of the enslavement of our ancestors. It was our ancestors picking cotton, sugarcane, hemp, etc., and so forth. The money that was produced from our free labor went back to Europe, and it was used to create the industrialization period, which spread obviously all throughout the world. And what we mean by industrialization is the mechanization of production. So instead of picking cotton by hands, now you had the cotton gin, a machine that could pick it faster and more efficiently. This was what industrialization was. So in essence, the chattel slavery system that was utilized in the Western Hemisphere, which African people were exploited to perform that labor, African people who were stolen from Africa, the money produced from that labor created the financial stream that financed the industrialization period. And it was the industrialization period that contributed to the development of the capitalist system, which is the dominant economic system in the world today. Capitalism is a system where all of the means of production are owned and controlled for the purpose of private profit. So the reason for this graphic here is that the system of exploitation of the African masses produced a class of African people, the African celebrities, whose sole purpose, as Malcolm X told us in 1964, their sole purpose of existence is to parrot the interests of the capitalist system. And this is important because most of us today, we look at these people as our barometer of success. We look at these people to determine what our vision should be for what kind of people we want to become. We look at these people as role models. Just listen to how we talk. It's always celebrities that we talk about. We don't talk about the people who made actual contributions to our forward progress as a people. We talk about the people who make songs, that make movies, that are politicians, that say all these flowery, wonderful things they're going to do for us, but don't do a damn thing. That's who we talk about. That's our concept of progress, the individual advancement of people. Well, this Negro won an Oscar, we're making progress. This Negro got elected president, we're making progress. This coon over here was the first CEO of this company, so that means we're making progress. When all of these things really don't mean a damn thing when it comes to what's happening with the masses of African people anywhere on earth. But what these people here, this capitalist system, they have done is they have convinced so many of us to believe that the individual advancements of these celebrity people is somehow supposed to be equatable to the conditions for the billions of African people on earth. And a lot of us either consciously or unconsciously accept that nonsense. So therefore, because we believe that somehow that means that whatever conditions we're facing, there's potential for us to improve them because we got Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence and Will Smith and Jada Pinkett and whoever the hell it is. I don't know, you name them. So LeBron James. So this is why we have the American flag here, because the entire objective of this program by the capitalist system is to push us towards identifying with American capitalism, with European capitalism, with capitalism imposed on Africa, with capitalism worldwide. That's the whole purpose. So when we in the 1960s said, no, we're going to take our history and we're going to utilize it whatever way we see fit, our enemies didn't just say, oh my God, we just have to get out of these people's way. No, they sat down at the table and began strategizing so that they could stay a step ahead of us. So when we said that, they said, okay, then what we'll do is we'll use our mass media, our education system that we control, everything that we do to propagate the ideas that people have, because the ideas that people have come from the capitalist system. I know we all want to believe that we think for ourselves, but that's a damn lie. We don't think for ourselves. And I can prove it to you quickly, because right now, wherever you are, there are people who are in other parts of the world that you have never been in and that you will probably never be in, who are doing the exact same things that you're doing, who dress the same way you dress, style their hair the same way you style yours, like the same type of cars that you like, eat the same types of food that you eat, listen to the same types of music that you listen to. And you all know that's true. And you've never met them. You've never been where they are. They've never met you. They've never been where you are. How the hell do you explain that if everybody thinks for themselves? Obviously, that clearly is not true. Clearly, there's propaganda beamed at all of us, and we all are conditioned to accept that propaganda as the method in which we should interpret the world we live in and how we should live in the world we live in. There's no question about that. I know we don't want to accept that. It doesn't matter what we want to accept. It's irrefutable that that is the reality that we live in this world today. So that even though we don't understand that and we don't want to accept it, the capitalist system is not confused about that. And they utilize that reality to ensure that their agenda is perpetuated and carried out. And the way they do that is they say, okay, we're going to redefine what African history is. It's not going to be defined as the collective advancement of the African masses, which is what was meant when we said that in the 1960s. It's not, we're going to make sure that people don't define it that way. Instead, we're going to make sure people define African history, Black history, whatever you want to call it, as individual advancement inside of the capitalist system. So that's how they've done it. That's why if you look at all of these so-called Black History Month commemorations, programs, sponsorships, whatever, they're all by who? Multinational capitalist corporations, Wells Fargo, State Farm, Aetna. I saw one the other day, Aetna sponsoring African history, Wells Fargo sponsoring African history. Both of those corporations started from seed money provided by the exploitation of our ancestors on the slave plantation. How the hell could they be concerned? If they were honestly concerned about our history, they would have to say, you know what, we're going to disband our corporations and we're going to distribute reparations first to the continent of Africa. And then from there, you know, it can be determined once we build up Africa, what the African people are going to do. That's how they could be concerned about our history. But you and I know that will never happen, will it? So instead, because we're we have so much smoke blowing between our ears, they know that all they have to do is sponsor a documentary on Oprah Winfrey, sponsor a documentary on LeBron James, put 2 or 3 Negroes through college so they can be educated petty bourgeoisie Negroes for the capitalist system. They know that's all they have to do, and we'll be fine with that. We're cool with that. Oh, that was so good. Did you see what they did? They put some Negroes through college. You know, because that's how we think. It doesn't matter if Bill Cosby raped and assaulted dozens of women. He put some Negroes through Negro colleges, and they're gonna come out and be petty bourgeoisie Negroes. So we shouldn't criticize. I mean, we are. I'm sorry, y'all. The way we function. If Martians landed here 100 years from now and they had video, they'd have to say them people were out of their goddamn minds. I mean, that's all they could say. So this is the strategy that our enemies use against us to undermine our history. And when they do this, they create this phenomenon where they are actually controlling how we interpret our history. They're the ones doing that. The capitalist system is doing that. So when they do that, what's happening is that they're recognizing that their goal is to keep us 100% dependent upon them to supply us any knowledge that we have. How do they do that? I'll tell you very easily how they do that. Make a decision right now that this week you're going to do a little social experiment. You're going to go out. If you go to a coffee shop, if you ride public transportation, you're seeing people. If you're looking at people, waiting, if you're standing in line, if you're at the DMV or whatever you're doing where there's people and people have to wait, study what they're doing. I will guarantee you right now that you will not even see 5%. You won't even see that, but you won't even see 5% of the people you're observing reading serious material. And what I mean by serious, I'm not talking about magazines and BS like that. I'm talking about reading books on history, reading books on philosophy and ideology, reading books on world economics, reading books of consequence that talk about how the world functions. You won't see 5%, you won't see 5 out of 100 people doing that, as opposed to how many people you'll see playing games on their phones or looking at stuff on their phones. That'll be 90% of the people you see. And I'm not saying you can't play, because we're so dumb. Oh, he said I can't play games on my phone. Oh, he said I can't look at anything. Nobody is saying that. What I'm saying is that the point is that what you'll find is that we are clearly not making an effort to study our history. So since we know that, and any social experiment will reveal that immediately, then once we establish that, there's no argument to say that, well, we know our history. They're not pulling the wool over our eyes. No, hell no. You don't know anything about your history. You're not studying it. So all we do is depend on our enemies to provide us our analysis of our history. If Netflix was not producing documentaries about our history, we wouldn't know anything. That's all we depend upon to provide us with an analysis of our history. And some of us are so arrogant when those of us who know better, when we see that and we quit, you got a nerve to get mad at us. You should be mad at yourself, because this is the trick that they play upon us. You cannot depend upon your enemies to educate you about your history. I mean, who doesn't know that in 2023? So they rely on us being ignorant. They depend upon us being ignorant in order for them to perpetuate this scam against us. And so it's not a question of them being intimidated by African history. They're not like people, they're scared of us and our history. No, they're struggling to get in control of our interpretation of our history, which is not difficult for them to do because we're not doing anything to protect and defend our history. We're relying on them to do that. We're relying on them to do that. So I had a discussion in Guinea-Bissau with one of our comrades there, and these Africans had secured a copy of the Selma movie, and they had it in Portuguese. I think it was on TV there. And they were telling me how offended they were. These are people that never been to the US and probably never will come here. But they were telling me how offended they were because they knew they had studied the history enough, because we went to a Martin Luther King Center in Bissau, the city of Bissau in Guinea-Bissau. They had hundreds of people there commemorating the life and works of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. That they had a center there. You here in this country, and the leaders of the independence movement in Guinea-Bissau, you never even heard of them until we said their names. Amilcar Cabral, Teodora Gomez, Carmen Piero. You never even heard of this. Tatina Sila. You never even knew these people. So these Africans on the ground, and I'm not trying to insult anybody, I'm just making the point of what an effort is made here to keep us ignorant here. You can't refute that. So these Africans had studied this movie, they'd studied the civil rights movement in this country, and so they knew that the movie was incorrect with how they portrayed Malcolm X. They knew that, and they were telling me that. I'm like, yeah, you're absolutely right. It was 100% correct. Whereas we are so silly in the head here that if some of those Africans, if we had a lot of us here had a chance to encounter them and have a discussion about that, a lot of us would argue with them. Well, you're not there. You don't even know. No, you don't know. They know much better than you do because they're studying history. Anybody can know if they study history. So that's the part we have to understand, is that if you have taken no effort to study your history, if you're not participating in the study and analysis of your history, you don't know it. It's just that simple. You don't know it. I know you want to believe you do, but you don't. You don't know it. You don't know it. You only know what your enemy has fed you, like an animal in a cage. That's how you know it. And so their objective with this, as I mentioned, they want to drive you to American identity. Because if they keep you ignorant about who you are, and meanwhile they're constantly bombasting you with pro-American propaganda, you're going to be influenced by that. And so that's why you think that you have to have American in your identity, because you have been conditioned to believe that America is the winner and everybody wants to be affiliated with the winner. And so you think that that's a good thing to be affiliated with America, that's a prideful thing to be affiliated with America. That's what we think here in this backward society. And we don't, our people have done a lot of work to bring Africa into the forefront, but there's constant efforts to dismantle that. And that's all coming from the capitalist system. I don't care if people say, well, we've been in this hemisphere for thousands of years as African people. We're black people indigenous to the America. That's a capitalist analysis. I don't care if people say, well, we came here, we fought here on the plantation, so we have earned our right to be here. That's a capitalist analysis. Why did I say it's a capitalist analysis? Because this land belongs to other people. And you know damn well, if somebody came and stole your house and kicked you out of your house, there would never be a day that you woke up and said, well, I guess that's their house now. You would see that, as you should, as your house for the remainder of your life. So we have to be people who stand up for justice. We cannot expect anybody to see our suffering if we're not willing to see anybody else's suffering. So we have to tell the truth. And the truth is, this land belongs to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. And when we say indigenous people, we're talking about the Indians, the Mexicans, the Puerto Ricanos, the Chicanos. Those are the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, the natives. Those are not you, African. You're not indigenous to the Western Hemisphere. Yeah, there might have been, of course, there were Africans who sailed over here thousands of years ago, and there are a few of us that may be descendants of those people, but that's not even 1% of us today that can make that claim. And those of you saying that, you know damn well that's true. So stop all those lies and open up some books and study Africa, because I have never met anybody spreading that nonsense who knew even the slightest thing about Africa. Even the slightest thing they don't know. And that's why they have to make up history and make up these lies to make themselves feel better about themselves. So they're no better than all of these people who are outwardly supportive of the capitalist system. Just because you blanket it in this so-called Black identity, it's still a capitalist analysis. That's exactly what it is. So what we're saying is that we give all of that back to them. We are not Americans. We're Africans in America, fighting against American capitalism. That's who we are. We don't want anything to do with American identity. Hand me an American flag and I'm setting it on fire. I'm telling you that right now. Hand me a US flag and that bad boy is going to be set ablaze. I'm telling you that right now. We have nothing but contempt for everything that it stands for. And don't come at us like the man the other day. I was doing a presentation. Well, why are you here? I said, you people, your ancestors stole everything we had from Africa for 500 years, including me. That's why I'm standing here, including the internet that I'm here talking through, including the clothes that I have on, including the car that I got here and the gas I put in it to get here. So we're here building capacity to take all our stuff back. That's why I'm here. It has nothing to do with you because you don't even belong here. You're an alien invader here, an illegal alien here in this hemisphere. So we owe you nothing. I don't know why you all keep being so kind and polite to these people. When they stop you with that racist violence, tell them, get the hell out of my face before I knock the hell out of you. I don't know what is wrong with us. So that we feel like we have to give compassion to these beasts and these animals. That tells you how sick we are right now. And I'm gonna tell you right now, I don't have people coming at me like that. Because they tell me, you can tell you're not somebody to be met. You goddamn right, I'm not somebody. I'm not going to sit around here and have you disrespect the legacy of our people, all the suffering that we've endured in this hemisphere. You walk up to me like that, you're going to have hospital bills. And the minute we start to have that mentality, these problems will stop for us. But it comes from understanding our history and knowing who we are. I am a proud African, and I'll be damned if anybody is going to disrespect that. Not even my people are committed through their ignorance to disrespect that. And that's just how we need to be moving forward. So, if we don't address that, the best we can do is be good slaves, be educated slaves. That's the best we can do. If we don't address this contradiction with our history, that's all we can do. And we want to do better than that. So let's talk about how we address these problems to move forward. If we want to have any chance of eradicating these contradictions, then we have to reclaim control of our history. We have to do that. And the only way we can do that is we have to understand our history. We have to be protectors of our history. And you can't protect something you don't know anything about. So if you have children, you have to make a commitment to make time to educate your children about who we are as African people. And we've said this 100,000 times and we'll say it again. We have all the materials to help you with your children. I say that all the time. Reach out to us. We always give you the address of betterworld.me. Nobody ever does. Nobody ever does because we don't see it as important. But it's the most important thing we could do. So we're saying, get control of our history. We have to do that, and we have to do it in an organized fashion. We can't just do it individually. That's not going to work. So that means we have to move our understanding of who we are outside of the parameters provided to us by our enemies. We have to determine who we are outside of the parameters provided to us by our enemies. Well, I don't think inside the parameters provided by our enemies. I think for myself. Okay, let's evaluate that statement. You got the name of the slave master. Every time you introduce yourself, you're introducing the slave master. You speak the language. We speak the language of the slave master. Every time we talk, we're representing the slave master. We call America home. Well, I'm going home. So the plantation, we identify with that as a slave master, but you think for yourself. I mean, I don't understand how we could be that confused. I'm not criticizing you for having a European name. History forced that on you. Not criticizing you for speaking a European language. History forced that on you. Not criticizing you for living in the Western Hemisphere. History imposed it on you. I am criticizing you for normalizing those things. Like that's how life is supposed to be. No, it's not. You know, people see me, oh, Jamu, oh, that's an interesting name. That's interesting that you have that name. And when they say that to me, I say, no, that's not interesting at all. That's how it should be. What's interesting is that your name is Johnson or Jackson or Jones. That's interesting. Like you don't see any Asian people named Jones and Smith. And if you do, you would look at them like, how the hell you get that name? But it's been so normalized with us, we don't even ask the question anymore. We just assume that when an African has an African name, that's strange to us. That's some backward thinking right there. But yet it's everywhere among our people. So that's what we have to come to understand, is how we can think outside of those types of parameters and begin to think as a free people. I don't want the master's name. I want to learn an African language. I want to speak African language to my children. I want to be a part of the struggle to liberate African people. That's how you think outside of the parameters provided by your enemies. And, you know, we have to reclaim all of this history that the enemy has co-opted from us. You know, Dr. King, I have a dream. And then 5 years pass and then he's assassinated and you don't even know why. Because what did he say in the I have a dream speech? And we have never bothered to study any of the other speeches he gave after that. We don't even know what those are. So it doesn't make sense. Why would he be assassinated for saying we should be together? Well, you believe that because they told you James Earl Ray, the white man, killed him because he didn't want to integrate. And so, again, your interpretation of our history is the one provided by our enemy. So you accept that. So to you, case closed. There's nothing else to talk about. That's it. And that had nothing to do with why Dr. King was killed. James Earl Ray had nothing to do with why Dr. King was killed. So we have to reclaim all of that in our image. We can't let them make Dr. King a poot butt that wouldn't defend himself. That's what they want you to believe because they want you to be a poot butt that won't defend yourself. We can't let them get away with that. We're not going to let them get away with that. We can't let them get away with softening the militancy of El Hajj Malik El Shabazz. They want to soften his militancy because they want you to soften your militancy. We're not going to let them get away with that. We're going to reclaim the militancy of Malcolm X because he gave us that and he gave his life to give us that present. And I'll be damned and we'll be damned if we take that for granted and let it seep through the holes in the concrete because we're too cowardly to reclaim our history. And we certainly have to reclaim Africa. We are reclaiming Africa today. Africa is our home and we are reclaiming it. We are not giving in to that. I don't care if we're here 1,000 years. This will never be my home. This will never be my home. This is the home of the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. If they allow us to stay here, and I have absolutely no doubt that they will, then that's fine. But that's different than me thinking this is where I belong. This is not where I belong. I was kidnapped. What kind of kidnap? You call it Stockholm syndrome. When somebody's kidnapped and they begin to identify with their kidnapper. And here we got 50 million Africans in this country, and a whole percentage of them have Stockholm syndrome, identifying with I'm an American. I ain't got nothing to do with Africa. I'm an American. You're a damn Stockholm syndrome baby. That's what you are. You're identifying with your slave master. I want to burn the damn plantation down. I am an African. Don't give me a match. I'm going to burn it down. That's what needs to happen to the plantation. They stole everything from us, and we want to get it back. And I hope if in the day that comes when I wake up and I don't feel like that is the day I hope I don't wake up. And then the only way we will see the necessity to do any of this is we have to awaken to what this capitalist system is doing to us. We have to understand what it does to us every day. It is constantly trying to dehumanize us and make us think that we somehow owe some debt to this backward society. How the hell do we owe anything to the United States of America, to Britain, to France, to Belgium, to Portugal, to Spain? Only thing we owe any of those places is to kick their you-know-what and get back what rightfully belongs. I don't owe a damn thing to this country, nothing. I've said it. I say it all the time. I went to work. If you don't believe it, ask the people where I work, at the union I work. I told them last week, I gave them a presentation on my trip to Guinea-Bissau, and I showed them a picture of our immortal comrade, Sister Teodora Gomez, and I said, that's my troop. She fought in the war. She led a contingent of women troops against the Portuguese. She's 80 years old. I told them, that's my, right there, that's my troop. That's who I support. You could take all the U.S. people in the U.S. military, and a lot of them in the room had been in the U.S. military. I said, all of y'all that were in the U.S. military, mailed all of you together, and you don't have the courage this woman has in her pinky nail. And that's the damn truth, because she stood up and risked her life for justice. You wouldn't know justice if it slapped the you-know-what out of you, putting on that damn uniform and fighting for red, white, and blue. You got to be out of your damn mind. So we have got to recognize, and we should have contempt for what the capitalist system does. I do. I'm sure you can hear it. Contempt for what the capitalist system does for us. Well, it might not be the hell with that. I got contempt for them because they got contempt for us. And that's never going to change. So we have to reclaim our history. And the bottom line is that we do it through an organized effort. You cannot do it individually. You've got to be involved in supporting the movement for African liberation. And from that flows all of the resources needed to supply us with the knowledge to reclaim our history. And that's a very critical part of our liberation struggle. So we want to thank you, as always, for spending this time with us. We want to ask you to let people know, that we do this every week, same time. Next week will be a God, Ancestors willing, our 146th episode. We're going to continue to bring the noise. People still watch. We have a lot of people who watch, and we're honored and humbled by that. And we're just simply trying to make a contribution that we feel like has to be made. We're sick of these people talking about us. We're sick of them talking down to us. We're sick of them shooting us down in the streets all over the world. We're sick of them disrespecting Africa. We're going to stand and reclaim our dignity. That's what we're going to do. And whatever this little bit, this program can do to contribute to that, we're going to continue to do it. So we ask you to join us next week, Sunday. That is wrong, and I apologize, did not update it as I thought I did. But actually, next week is February 12th, and our topic is going to be the FBI's secret war against the Black Panther Party and the American Indian Movement. The FBI's secret war against the Black Panther Party and the American Indian Movement. We're going to talk about all of the evil things this backward cesspool empire did to undermine and destabilize the Black Panther Party and the American Indian Movement. So we want to ask you to be here for that. Please continue to go to our APRP Forward Ever shop and buy some of our clothing. We have clothing there designed to uplift the dignity of our people. So we want to ask you to do that. Don't go outside with no Nike emblem on. Go outside with something commemorating our struggle for justice and forward progress. And go to aprp-intl.org. Join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. I'm definitely in the city I'm living in, doing a lot of work going forward to really rebuild our efforts here. So wherever you live, you should do that. Join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And as I said, you can go to betterworld.me, reach out to me and Shakur. That's the best way to do it. You can donate there. You can also look at all of these videos. They're all housed there. So you don't have to try to find them on YouTube. You can just go to one place and see all of them. hoodcommunist.org. You want to go there, new articles every week. I actually had one posted there this past week on why y'all still expect the police to be your friends. Just don't understand it. Shows you how sick we are. So check that out. We're still wanting you to scan the QR code there and donate to the Thomas Sankara Center for Liberation and Pan-African Unity. Some of our on-the-ground work in Burkina Faso, West Africa. So support that. We have a number of these programs here. The Pontula program, the APRP New Mexico Weekly News broadcast, Forward Ever, Revolutionary African Women. Of course, this program, Our Ancestors' Voices. So support those. And take a look at my book and get it. It's only $8, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. We appreciate you. We hope to see you here next week. Please tell a friend about these programs. That's how we spread the word. You know, NBC, ABC, and CIA not going to advertise revolutionary programming for African people. Come on now. So help out. Do your part. Let people know. All right. And have a safe and positive week. We'll see you next week. Forward ever and backwards never.